Since the beginning of my work, my attitude towards commitment has steadily changed. In my first attempts of writing, I had only my own existence in mind. It was the time of emigration and war. I didn't belong anywhere, and I made a virtue out of this non-belonging. It was my commitment not to be engaged in a struggle which in my view was insane. Even if the whole world would be divided into a fight on life and death, I would try to keep out of it. I would dig myself into a hiding place as long as possible, as I couldn't see any ideology which was worth sacrificing my life for. I still was the child hiding away when street fighting broke out, and when I, from my cellar hole, observed the brawls and screams from the world above. Art was born out of a voluntary isolation. I would describe for myself what was going on up there, and I described it as an absurdity of powers which were rolling on towards each other. Sometimes I saw somebody being knocked down by some superiority. I heard him yell for help, but I made no move to come to his rescue. I saw them lying wounded on the streets, and I still kept quiet. My commitment was not to draw any attention to myself, so I could build up my superiority while the world outside was in convulsions. Soon there were corpses on the streets. I saw how people were pulled out of their homes, loaded into trucks and driven away. I heard the shooting, more screams, and I didn't move. Then the houses were bombed down. Whole cities were bombed into ashes. The country filled with fugitives, mountains of dead at the waysides, and I still not injured. Even if it was all quiet in my hole, I had frightful experiences of imagination. Real peace was impossible even for me, as long as the disaster was going on outside. All the time I had to think about how it was to be persecuted, to be caught, to be beaten and shot to death. This went on for years. Still, I had no idea what it was all about. All my strength was concentrated in not getting involved. I was fascinated by the power of destruction. I was drawing and writing down my visions. I was making art into my shelter while the world went to pieces. It's your own fault, I was thinking, when I saw the soldiers marching and dying. I could only imagine they acted in blindness as I myself was blind. What an existence I built up for myself. An existence consisting of books, paintings, music, sporadic lovemaking. An existence crowned with the triumph of being still alive, of having a room of my own with a key to my own door. Then suddenly it was all over. Nothing was damaged in my room, food in the kitchen, and outside millions and millions of dead. Now first, when danger was over, I dared to go out. Who was it who had fought outside? Who was it who got killed? Who was it who had killed? But I still could not see the connections which had made this slaughter possible. I only saw some of them who had fought against each other, embrace each other, and turn against a third one. I saw how they, as they were reconstructing their cities, constructed new weapons. I saw how quickly they forgot the buried corpses. This only confirmed the view of one great phantasm, and I could live on, content that I was right. But I still hadn't answered the question why they had let themselves be killed, all these millions, and then, very slowly, I had to experience it all over again, how they had been caught, how they had been punished to death. And not all of them had fought back. Many of them, if not most of them, had been as I had been, passive, frightened, not understanding, just overwhelmed by this sudden horror. How was it possible? How could they let themselves be torn out of their homes, see their children and parents die, see everything they owned be demolished, and then step into their own graves? Now my commitment concentrated on finding out something about the reasons for this dying, which seemed so meaningless. In the beginning, I could still identify myself with either the murdered or the murderers. I didn't think any longer I could be different or better than they were, and I thought it would just depend on which side I had been put. I tried to describe the surrounding in which I grew up, and I saw how I had been educated into one direction while other powers prepared another destiny on my behalf. Everything seemed to be settled for myself in one great and safe society, while in reality I already was nominated to be its victim. I could have become, even against my will, a warrior, as all my classmates had, and I could have marched on together with them until my brains were blown out for the sake of our great and safe society. Who knows if I had had the strength of doubt and resistance, or the guts to fight against a cause which I had found out to be rotten. When I was thrown out of this society because they had made up their mind that there should be another race which had to be extinguished, I was surprised and couldn't believe it. Was I different? Hadn't I read as all the others about our heroes? Wasn't I ready to build up my glorious future here? No, I had to be exploited. And all this happened without myself taking part in it. I hadn't even known that I fitted into this other race, and I didn't know what to do with this new difference. I couldn't commit myself to it. Anyhow, there were these forces which left no other choice but my disappearance. Had I stayed, I had gone the same direction as all the others, right into this enormous mud of ignorance. There were some years when I felt this atavistic and petrified guilt that I should have gone the way which had been staked out for me, and that I was a traitor towards all these millions who got caught. There might have been two possibilities while I grew up. The one possibility, to become a conqueror, a murderer, passed me by. The other, to let myself be conquered and murdered, escaped. The third way, the direction towards clear-sightedness, analysis, didn't exist yet, was never handed to you. You had to find it out for yourself. As I was brought up deep in the midst of this murderous society, I was kept away from those who could have told me something about the other possibilities. So I spent many years to explain to myself how it was to drown in this society, to get utterly lost in it, to see no way out, and even to accept this final situation. This was still the commitment to the impossibility of penetrating this world, and in this commitment to the impossible, poetry was at home. Here in this no man's land I had the satisfaction of building up values which existed in spite of all other absurdity. I could have gone on, deeply committed to my art, writing, painting, making films about this doomed state, with expressions of despair and distortion, and even with rebellion and shoutings that it should be all different and that there should be somewhere some hope. And all this only served the society which had made me the one I was and which did everything to keep me in this somnambulism. While I was establishing this untouchable sanctuary of art, these hymns to my freedom, the fight I had watched from the beginning was going on outside. The massacres were continued. 10,000s were thrown into the prisons of Greece. 80,000 were murdered by the colonizers in Madagascar, 100,000 during the French fight in Vietnam. Innumerable were the dead in the Congo, in Angola. Millions were kept as slave workers in South Africa. Millions were suppressed in Latin America. The great robbery was going on all the time. You could see it, and as long as you looked on it and did not revolt against it, you accepted it, and you too were responsible for it. Thus your commitment to art, while you were conscious of the disaster around, was at the same time a commitment to destruction. And as long as you thought you could go on with your art without bothering about the rest, you were part of the corruption. When I studied the formerly unintelligible world of speeches, declarations, negotiations, demands, agreements, and aggressions, everything I had written before went very thin. All my well-formulated sentences had not proved more than moments of a personal truth, and they had resulted only in safeguarding my own existence. Very belatedly, I explored the facts of politics and economics, which made the hallucinative machinery run. But being brought up as a link within this machinery, it takes time until you understand what you are used for. Instead of revolt, I had my melancholia and misery, and instead of knowledge, I had metaphysics. Soon dear old symbolism went its way, and alas, there went the beauty of psychotic vision. The more I understood the signs of injustice, the treachery and violence around, the better became my spirits. Even if I did not know yet how to transform the political insight into writing, I was sure I had gained something new. There was this view that the author should keep out of political participation, and he should be the one who keeps objectivity alive, that he should see both the positive and negative aspects in the forces involved in their universal struggle. But was not life too short for this objectivity? Wasn't it just another lie in order not to get yourself burned? There was one essential question: who needed your writing? And could your writing contribute to making your surroundings more habitable? It was not enough when you tried to establish empathy with the suppressed and exploited. You also had to stand up for them in your writing. Then, of course, the situation would change. They who had applauded your boldest experiments, who had liked the exhibition of your desperation, would say that you were growing weaker now, that you were losing in art. I can no longer believe in an independent circle of art, even if this meant that I had to start all over again and to take along all failures. I do not think this is an exceptional situation for a writer. There are many who work both out of the need of expressing human individualism and the need for radical political changes. The conflicts which arise out of this commitment will be part of our work. We will have to live with them. Often they will give the motives we try to solve in writing.